All right, welcome everybody to the deep dive. Today we're going to be digging into something a lot of you have been asking about, and that's the real cost of living in India versus the USA. And I'll tell you, forget those super simple currency conversions you see online, because we're going way deeper than that.
Absolutely. We've got a ton of information to really get into the nitty-gritty here. What does your money actually get you in each of these countries? We'll be looking at the lifestyle, quality of life, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So to kick things off, we came across a question in our research that really got us thinking. Would you rather pay, say, $40,000 for a pretty nice apartment in Mumbai, or would you rather pay $2,500 for a similar place in New York City? Now, at first glance, you might think, well, duh, of course I'd rather pay $40,000. But that's what we're going to unpack today, the real value you get for your money in each place. So our mission today is to figure out what your money actually unlocks in these two very different places. Think housing, food, getting around, healthcare, education, basically all those daily costs that, kind of make up our lives. Okay, so let's start unpacking this whole thing. And I think the best place to start is probably with housing, right? I mean, for most of us, it's the biggest expense we have each month.
Totally, yeah. Housing is often the biggest chunk of your budget. And the differences between India and the US, well, they're pretty significant. So if you're looking at a big city in India, like, say, Delhi, Mumbai, or Bangalore, you could probably find a pretty decent 2 BHK, so that's 2 bedrooms, a hall, and a kitchen for somewhere between 25,000 and almost 60,000 per month. Now, if you convert that, you're looking at roughly like 300 to 700 US dollars.
Wow, that is cheap.
Yeah.
Okay, so now compare that to, let's say, New York City or Los Angeles. What would a similar apartment go for there?
Oh, man, you're talking a completely different ballpark. You're looking at like $2,000 to $3,000 a month easily. That's
Yeah.
something like 1.6 to 2.5 lakh, which when you put it that way, it's a pretty big
Oh,
difference.
for sure, yeah. It's crazy how much more expensive it is when you look at it side by side like that.
Hmm.
But here's the thing. Our research also showed something really interesting about home ownership.
Oh, right, right.
Even though renting is way cheaper in India, owning a home in the U.S. could actually be easier for some people, and often a lot earlier in life, too. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it comes down to a few things. First, mortgages in the U.S. are set up differently. Loans can be a lot longer, like 30 years, and the interest rates are usually lower than in India. This means that even though the house itself costs more, the monthly mortgage payments can be a little bit more manageable, you know? Plus, the U.S. has this credit scoring system that helps determine, like, who qualifies for a loan and what interest rate they'll get.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the price tag on the house, it's about the whole system that supports people buying homes. So maybe in the short term, renting in India is cheaper. But if you're thinking long term about, building equity and owning your own place, the U.S. could be a better option, and even sooner for people making dollars. Like in India, a lot of people end up renting for way longer, maybe even relying on family for help with housing.
Right, exactly. It makes you think about the bigger picture of housing costs, not just what you're paying every month in rent.
Exactly. It's about the long game. Okay, let's move on to something we all deal with every day: food. And let's be real, in India, food is a huge part of the culture. So what does it cost to actually put food on the table in these two countries?
Well, if you're grocery shopping in India, especially for all the basic stuff that most Indian diets are built on, it's actually really affordable. We saw that a small family could easily buy all their rice, lentils, tons of fresh veggies, even some chicken or fish for under 1,500 to 2,000 euros per week. It's definitely cheaper than a lot of Western countries.
Wow, yeah, that does sound super budget friendly, especially for all those staple ingredients. But I remember reading that some specific foods can actually be kind of expensive in India.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like if you're looking for stuff that's not really grown locally or things that are considered more, exotic, you can expect to pay a premium. Things like blueberries or really good imported cheeses, those can get pricey. It's one of those things that might surprise people.
Yeah, that is surprising. So what about the U.S.? What does the average grocery bill look like there?
Well, in the US, the average family probably spends between $60 and $100 a week on groceries. And of course, it can be even more depending on what you like to eat and where you live. But the interesting thing is some imported or luxury items are actually cheaper and more widely available in the US. Stuff like fancy cheeses, wines from all over the world, imported chocolate. You often get a better deal on those in the US.
So it's almost like a flip, in a way.
Hmm.
Fresh, everyday ingredients are more affordable in India. But if you're looking for more international or fancy stuff, the U.S. might actually be cheaper. Okay, so what about everyone's favorite quick meal fast food? How do the costs compare there?
Ah, yeah, fast food. That's another big difference. So if you're getting, say, a McDonald's meal in the US, it'll probably cost you between $1 and $3, especially if you go for the value menu or look for deals. Now, that same meal in India, you're probably looking at 200 to 300 gul.
Huh, interesting. It really shows you where you get more bang for your buck in each country. So to recap the food situation, India is the winner for fresh, home-cooked meals, but the U.S. might win if you're all about fast food and certain imported groceries.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's switch gears and talk about getting around transportation.
Transportation is another area with big differences between the two countries. It all comes down to infrastructure and how many people live in each place. So in India, especially in cities, there's a ton of different public transport options, and they're super cheap. The metro might cost you less than 50, and a quick auto rickshaw ride could be anywhere from 30 to 150. It's often a bit chaotic, but you can't beat the price.
Yeah, I've heard it described as chaotic but cheap before, and it seems to fit the bill. So how does that compare to transportation in the U.S.?
Well, in a lot of the U.S., especially outside the big cities, public transportation is kind of limited. Places like New York have amazing subways. A single ride is about $2.75, but in many other places, it's just not that practical to rely only on public transport. There are ride-sharing apps like Uber, but those can add up really quickly, maybe $10 to $30 a ride, sometimes even more, depending on how far you're going and what time it is.
Right. And for a lot of people in the U.S., owning a car is pretty much a necessity, isn't it? So
Yeah.
how does that factor into the cost of transportation overall?
Yeah, owning a car in the U.S. comes with a bunch of extra expenses. Gas prices go up and down, and sometimes they're lower than other places. But then you've got your monthly car payments if you have a loan, insurance premiums, and then all the maintenance and repairs. It all adds up to a pretty big chunk of your monthly budget.
For sure. So while a single bus or subway ride might be more expensive in the U.S., the overall cost of transportation in India is probably lower thanks to all the cheap public options and, scooters being so popular. Even with all the traffic, which, by the way, can be super stressful and time-consuming, it's still cheaper to get around.
Absolutely. Scooters are everywhere in India, and the public transport network is huge, so it's pretty easy to travel cheaply, though you're right, the traffic is a big downside. You can end up spending hours just sitting in traffic. Okay, let's move on to something really important when we talk about cost of living. Healthcare.
Yeah, healthcare. This is a big one, and I'm guessing we're going to see some of the biggest differences here. So what's the deal with healthcare costs in India?
Healthcare in India, especially if you go to government hospitals or mid-tier private hospitals, is surprisingly affordable compared to the U.S. You can get a full medical checkup for something like $1,000 to $2,000.
Wow, that is crazy affordable. All right, so now for the other side of the coin, what we've all been waiting for, healthcare in the U.S.
Yeah, the U.S. healthcare system is totally different, and the costs are a major difference. Just walking into an emergency room without insurance could end up costing you $500 or more, and that's before they even do anything. Even a simple blood test could be around $200, and that's just for the basic stuff. If you need more complex procedures, you could be looking at tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's definitely a major point of difference when comparing the cost of living.
Yeah, those numbers are really eye-opening. It makes you realize how vulnerable people can be in the U.S. if they don't have good insurance.
That's the key thing. The U.S. has amazing medical technology, really skilled doctors, and you can often get specialized care faster. But if you don't have good health insurance, it's going to be incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
People might even avoid going to the doctor because they just can't afford it. Whereas in India, even though the quality of care might vary, most people can access basic health care because of government subsidies and the way prices are structured.
So basically, you trade off affordability for access to really advanced care. You can get great care in the U.S., but only if you have good insurance, which can be really expensive. In India, healthcare is much more affordable, even if the quality might not always be the same. Okay, let's move on to another really important thing that impacts your future: education.
Education costs are another interesting comparison. Both India and the U.S. have free public schools for primary and secondary education.
Right, so everyone gets the same basic education for free.
Yeah.
So when do the costs start to become different?
The differences start to show when you look at private schools, and then it becomes even bigger when you talk about college and university. Private schools in India can cost anywhere from about $50,000 to $5 lakh per year, depending on the school's reputation and how fancy it is.
Yeah.
In the U.S., private school tuition is usually between $10,000 and $30,000 per year.
So private school is a big expense in both countries, but it sounds like the top-tier schools in India are especially expensive. What about college and university? That's a huge financial decision for a lot of people.
That's where you see a really massive difference. Let's say you want to get a professional degree in India, like engineering, from a good university. You're probably looking at spending between 2 and 1 lakh in total for the whole degree. In the US, though, it's common for students to graduate with tons of debt, like $50,000 to $100,000, sometimes even more. It's a huge factor to consider when choosing where to study.
Wow, yeah, that amount of debt can really impact someone's life after graduation. But U.S. universities do have a reputation for certain strengths. What are those?
Yeah, US universities often have more diverse programs, so you have more options to study what you're interested in. They also have more opportunities to study abroad and do exchanges, and they often have more funding for research, which leads to all sorts of new discoveries and specialized fields of study. But you're right, all those advantages come with a huge price tag for students and their families. They often have to take out big loans that they'll be paying back for years.
So yeah, the U.S. might have more resources and a certain structure, but the cost is definitely a big difference compared to India.
Okay, so we've covered the big stuff: housing, food, transportation, healthcare, and education. So let's talk a bit about those day-to-day expenses, entertainment, and just general lifestyle costs.
Right, lifestyle costs are another interesting point of comparison. For instance, a movie ticket in India might cost you between 200 and 400, whereas in the U.S. it's usually $10 to $15. A gym membership in India could be around $1,500 per month, while in the U.S. it's more like $40 to $70. And maybe the biggest difference is eating out. You can get a really good meal at a restaurant in India for $300 to $500, but in the U.S. it's hard to find a decent sit-down meal for under $20 per person, and often it's way more.
It sounds like India is the clear winner if you want to have an active social life and go out to eat without spending a fortune.
I'd say so, yeah. If you want to have fun and enjoy life on a budget, your money will probably go further in India. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Housing, food, transportation, healthcare, education, and even just the cost of having sun. So taking all of that into account, what's the overall picture when it comes to the cost of living in India versus the U.S.?
Overall, I think it's fair to say that India is generally more affordable. You can probably have a pretty comfortable life there on a lower income. Plus, it's a country with a really rich culture and lots of different things to experience.
And what about the U.S.? What's the main takeaway about the cost of living there?
The U.S. often has better infrastructure and services, and things are generally more modern. But all of that comes with a much higher price tag, especially for housing, healthcare, and education.
So it really is a trade-off, isn't it? India seems to offer more bang for your buck in a lot of areas of life, while the U.S. offers more comfort and access to certain advanced services, but only if you can afford it.
Exactly. Deciding where to live isn't just about money. It's also about your personal priorities, your career goals, the lifestyle you want, and things like social support systems.
This has been a super insightful deep dive, and we went way beyond that initial question about apartments. So as we wrap up, here's a final thought for you to ponder. Thinking about everything we've talked about today, the ins and outs of housing costs, food budgets, transportation options, those huge differences in healthcare, the cost of education, and even the cost of having fun. What does cost of living really mean to you right now? And how do these two very different countries, India and the U.S., fit into your personal values when you're weighing value versus comfort? It's something to think about even after we sign off today.